from the broadcast studio, hitting in the static. This ain't no bedtime story, son, it's prophetic. Encrypted signals from the shadows of the garden. We dig where the dirt got secrets, no parting. Microphone alchemist, scriptures with a twist. Peep the frequency, seeds in the mist. We drop bars like plagues, revelations in the cadence. Broadcasting truth while they trapped in surveillance. Wisdom with a watchman's blade. Fourth watch style while your whole system fade. Blood moons, Nephilim, echoes in the pine. Sasquatch stomping through the fault lines of time. We ain't mainstream, we ancient stream. Cypher with the prophets, decode the dream. So if you tuned in, better guard your mind. It's broadcasting seeds and we breaking the design.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Broadcasting Seeds. Today we've got Joel Thomas, who really doesn't need an introduction, but for those that do not know you, Joel, can you tell people who you are and what you do?
Yeah, my name's Joel Thomas, and I am the host of Free the Rabbits podcast. I'm also a musician, and I also make documentary films with Merkle Media and Dark Holler Productions, and we run around all over the place hunting the weird, the strange, anything in between. And we've got some really cool series coming out next year too, in addition to all the films that are already out at merklefilms.com. So I am into a whole lot, and I've got some other things behind the scenes that I'm not talking about yet, but I got some other things I'm working on too, so stay pretty busy.
Excellent. Absolutely. What's the place you want to drive people to?
If you want to, just go to Joel Thomas Media. Actually, go to Linktree/Joel Thomas Media. That'll get you to every single thing.
Gotcha.
So you go there, you can get access to all of it.
Yeah, just because, sometimes we have favorites.
Right.
Like I hate Facebook, but I love Instagram. So,
right.
Things like that.
Right.
So the one question I ask everyone that comes on is, and you keep it as short or as long as you want because we have some other stuff to talk about. But what got you into this world of high strangeness?
Yeah, so I would say that my parents, specifically my mom, did when I was a kid. So I have been into the cryptids, UFOs, conspiracy theories since I was probably 5 or 6 years old, and I'm 44 now. So I
It's a while.
say that to say I've seen the conspiracy world change and evolve for good or bad over the last, 35 years. And I think that I'm able to look at things with a little bit different lens than, say, somebody who just got into stuff around 2020 or earlier. And I think that people that got into conspiracy theories, maybe around 2016, when we had the big craze that went down with Trump getting in office and, we had Pizzagate and all those things. That was kind of when people first got the mainstream taste of conspiracy theories. And then when 2020 hit, obviously we had a lot of craziness going on around the world, and that spawned off a whole other group of people to get involved with conspiracy theories. So again, good and bad. It's good that people can see things a little bit differently, but at the same time, I think there's definitely a manipulative force behind the conspiratorial and truther world as well. And I know you're very familiar with Cass Sunstein and what I call the Cass Sunstein effect. So I'm really big on him specifically and Adrian Vermeule in the paper they wrote and how it really shaped what we now know as the truther community. And I do think that the government entities are involved with a lot of what I like to call the mainstream conspiracy theories. And I know truthers conspiracy theories hate hearing that word put together, but it's true. So once you get out of what we call the mainstream, you have the conspiratorial world, and then you got a mainstream within that. Because if you try to use logic or critical thinking against some of these mainstream conspiracy theories, then they treat you just like the mainstream people do. They, say you're a psyop or a fed or controlled op or whatever they want to use to discredit any kind of critical thinking. And my take on conspiracies is this: they absolutely exist. We know that some of them verbatim exist per the CIA files that have been released over the last 50 plus years. So that's a fact. Conspiracy theories are a little bit different than conspiracies because those are something that are a little less tangible to prove. But we do have some that have a lot of evidence that point towards there being something not right. It just gets a little too much when people get tribalistic and then they're fighting over their favorite theory like it's, God's word or something. So
Yeah.
that to me is why I started Free the Rabbits. But to your point of when it started when I was a kid, I've actually, funny enough, I've got my mom sent me these, man, about a year ago, and I laughed when I got them from her. And she sent me these two books I had as a kid. I have literally The Portal by Bill Meyer. When I was a kid, I used to read. And then I've got My Life is Bigfoot Breath, which was the other one that I read as a
Absolutely.
kid too. So yeah, I've been in this for a long time. So I went from watching it being really fringe and it just being a few people that had these ideas. And then I remember in like the early 2000s, more people started taking it on board, but it was still very much in its infancy and people just sharing ideas around a campfire. And you'd have a guy talking about flat earth and a guy talking about civilizations on the moon, and they could have a civil conversation and it wasn't fighting over the shape of the earth and you're going to hell if you don't believe it's flat or
Right.
something like that, which is wild. And you've got people that actually say that now, which is super strange to me.
So wild. So
But
wild.
I know you and I have talked in length at the last event we were at together, and we talked a little bit about some of this kind of stuff and just how that the truther world is something that I think needs some voices of reason in it, people that can at least try to think with logic and reasoning and say, hey, this hot new thing, let me put it to the fire and the test of actual research and see if it holds up.
Yeah.
And I think there needs to be bolder people in this space that are willing to take the shrapnel. I don't know if you ever watched that movie with Ben Stiller and who else was in that? Jack Black.
Oh, Tropic Thunder.
Tropic Thunder.
Bro.
At the beginning when he's getting lit up by all the bullets and he
Yeah.
keeps getting up, got to be willing to do that. Willing to take a bunch of hits
You gotta have a couple bullet sponges, man.
You got to.
Yeah, you
So
do.
I think that there are more people now coming forward that are becoming voices in the space that are challenging some of these quote unquote mainstream conspiracy theories that everybody loves and saying, look, there might be some truth here, but also know that there are government entities manipulating them too. So
Absolutely.
I think that's why I started Free the Rabbits.
Yeah. I think so many people are so quick to put all their eggs in one basket because it's neat and tidy. And people want, you just talked about it a second ago, where people want clean. And this is what I believe, and this is it. And anything outside of that, I just can't handle. So,
Right.
So all this stuff rhymes, man. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. And it's that, like a board where it's got all the strings and everything. You can do that with all this stuff. So I 100% agree. So yeah, man. Let's talk about some bloodlines.
Right. That was what we talked about when I met you for the first time.
Yeah.
Yeah. We'll definitely talk about specifically the supposed bloodlines of Jesus and then what I think that those bloodlines actually are, because I do think there are groups that are protecting bloodlines throughout the world. And I think that the version that they're masquerading as Jesus's bloodlines aren't actually his, but something far more nefarious. But these Gnostic groups like the Cathars, the Essenes, the Manichaeans, Mandaeans, all down through which also infiltrated on the Catholic Church side of things when we're talking about the Templars, when we'll talk about the Priory of Sion today, Rex Deus today
Stuff
too.
is wild.
And we'll get into how all of those different groups are working together to protect what they say is the messianic line of Jesus Christ. And they don't believe that Jesus was divinity at all. He was a prophet, not to say that he didn't have prophetic powers and he did things that would be mystical, because all these groups are Gnostic. So they believe that you can ascend and you can become essentially an ascended master, and you can become one of these Mahatmas or secret chiefs or what group wants to say in Theosophy or the Golden Dawn, or we can trickle it down to the Ordo Templi Orientis, the OTO. We could go into the AA that Crowley started. Any of those kind of have those same ideas, and it's all rooted in Gnosticism and the occult. And I think that, again, the bloodlines of Jesus is super interesting. I mean, I think a lot of us remember the Da Vinci Code when it came out, and Holy Blood, Holy Grail, the book, and everybody was really going nuts when the Da Vinci Code came out. And it was a fun movie. And I actually went back recently when I did this series to watch it again, and I enjoyed it again later on in life. So the movie wasn't enjoyable, but I take it completely as fiction, but also truth at the same time, in the sense of a lot of what they were saying in the movie lined up with a lot of historical research that you can look at and say, well, these groups existed and they are protecting what they're saying is this messianic line of Jesus Christ. It's just that Jesus didn't have any kids. And the fact that they are promoting that he had children because they want to take away the idea that he was the embodiment of God. And they also want to raise Mary Magdalene on a pedestal, which essentially is the Gnostic idea of the divine feminine, which would be the opposite of the Christ. So, and she would be Sophia. So that's kind of what is the underlying meaning in all that, because they want to bring Mary Magdalene up to on par with Jesus in this entire thing. And because she bore his children, then they are on the same level, which again, I don't agree with at all, because if you believe that Jesus is God, no man is on the same level of Jesus. So as we get into this, though, we're going to talk about some names, and I mentioned them already. Rex Deus, we got Knights Templar. We'll briefly mention the Rosicrucians, Merovingians, Priory of Sion. We'll talk a lot about today. And there's a couple of early things that we need to bring up first. We've got the Desposyni, and the Desposyni is the relatives of Jesus Christ. And sometimes that gets muddled with this Rex Deus, and people say, oh, with the bloodlines of Jesus. And well, okay, his brothers and sisters, we don't know of any sisters biblically, but we do know brothers, because we know Matthew 13:55 talks about, is this not the carpenter's son? Are not his brothers James, Joseph, Simon, and Judas? So we do know that he had brothers, and that they were very important in the early church days after he ascended to go back to heaven. So we do know that the Desposyni was very important in the early church days. As a matter of fact, they dealt with a lot of pushback from the governments, and we know the early church really had it tough. I mean, a lot of the apostles were being beheaded and killed, and stoned in the streets for being Christians. This is before, obviously, that Constantine came along and made it the Roman religion. And there's a whole other rabbit hole with all that, obviously. And that does tie into this too, though, because you had the Catholic Church going on, but they were fighting these Gnostic groups that were claiming to be protecting the bloodlines of Jesus, while simultaneously the Gnostic groups were infiltrating the Catholic Church and running groups out of there, like the Templars and the Rosicrucians and some of these other different factions, right? So in essence, it's the same it is now in politics, right? That's what the politics were of that age, was religion. So you had a nefarious cabal behind the scenes that was Gnostic and occult through and through, that was manipulating both of these groups, and they were simultaneously infiltrating the Catholic Church and running a lot of nefarious ideas out of it.
Yeah. It's absolutely wild. I can't. The whole Catholic Church gives me the willies in the first place. just because of what, I mean, if you go back to in the history, it's just how it's even got with the point where you had all the infiltration from the Gnostics and then the rise of the Jesuits, and man, stuff gets wild. It's almost too much to handle, right? So you got to take it. That's why you got to take it in bites. You can't eat the whole elephant at one time.
And I think too, one thing that I try to be real cognizant of when I'm researching the Catholic Church and different church fathers that came out of there and different people, they weren't all bad. And there were some great leaders that were within the Catholic Church that had great ideas. Some of them actually left the Catholic Church over those ideas too. You look at Martin Luther, but we definitely have some people who, during a period of time where for you to get access to the Word of God, you needed to be able to learn how to read and write. You need to learn, in some cases, Latin. And some of those guys went through the church to be able to learn the Word of God. And I don't think that as a whole that the Catholic Church is evil through and through, but I do think the origination point started as a very political idea. And I do think there were some good people that were involved early and involved later, even involved now. But then it's like anything, right? The higher you go up, the more infiltration you see from people who want to manipulate the good that's in it. So it's kind of a mixed bag, but I will say, though, that the Catholic Church was very influential in manipulating a lot of ideas throughout history.
Oh yeah. I mean, they definitely wove. Well, it's one of those things. They were the original, I guess you could call them like media, companies, right? They controlled the message, and if they controlled the message, they controlled everything. They were very good. Well, they're probably still one of the best in the world at it, controlling a message. So that's a huge thing.
Absolutely. And to swing back into this Desposyni, and what they get confused with a lot of time is Rex Deus. And it's translated to king god or god king. And it depends on who you talk to about who Rex Deus is, what they were involved with. There's a lot of theories that overlap with European families into the lineage of Jesus. They're kind of the main thread, right? They're the ones, because they're the ones that are interwoven in with all of these different bloodlines that are talked about. The Merovingians, we talk about the Sinclairs, we can get into some of the other groups like the Priory of Sion. Rex Deus is kind of the hidden hand behind all of it. And there's some writings that were in the late 20th century that popularized the idea, and they purportedly trace it back to the lineage of these temple priests, the Zadokite line, and the sons of Zadok, which Zadok is talked about in the prophecies of Ezekiel, and Zadok was a high priest in Solomon's temple at the time. So these Zadokite priests were of God, but according to what ended up coming out of their bloodlines later is this Rex Deus group. And they're a wild group, man. So they are interesting in the sense that they have titles that are names that we recognize in the Bible. Melchizedek, Michael, Gabriel, and every generation has one, has a Melchizedek, has a Michael, has a Gabriel. And purportedly, the way that their temples and schools work, and this isn't for the baby ears, just to give anyone listening, it's not going to be a great thing to listen to, but the Rex Deus priesthood, they operate 2 boarding schools in the temple complex, and they have one for boys and one for girls. And at the privilege of, and they also, what they do is when the girls become of age, they deflower them and then marry them off the husbands who raised the children of the priest that violated the young girls.
Gotcha.
And then the children they bring back into the temple and they do it all over again. And they basically are trying to continue these bloodlines, and supposedly of one such union, this is where Jesus came from, and he was fathered by a priest with a ceremonial name Gabriel. So this is their story. Obviously, I don't believe it, but this is their story of what they believe. And what they've tried to do is protect this messianic bloodline of Jesus, who is their, I wouldn't even say Messiah, just more of a Messiah-like character, but combined with the bloodline of Mary Magdalene, they have these children and these bloodlines that they protect out of it. Now, when we get to the end of this episode, I'll suggest what I think is actually the bloodlines and what they are. But I also think this is Gnosticism 101, right? It's the steps to devalue Jesus. It's to take away his divinity and to take away our responsibility to him and our ability to give our life to him and become saved, right? And it kind of lends into what now we see in the New Age movement with Christ consciousness, that everyone can reach this state of Christ. We can all become Christ, right? If we do enough
Christ
good
is right
work.
here, man. It's right inside you.
Right, exactly. And the truth is, when you give your life to Christ, he is,
but
correct. It's not something you can manifest by yourself by doing good enough, or no man's good enough. The Bible talks about that. And that's the key, is giving your life to him. And when you do, then he begins to manifest in you things that you never knew possible, and the way that you connect to people, and the way that you view life, and the way that you grow as a human being. All these things happen, but it doesn't happen on your own. And that's the ego part of Gnosticism, right? It's killing the ego by growing the ego, is what I always say, because they always say they kill the ego so they can, beat up the demiurge to get into the pleroma and become an ascended master. But there's a lot of ego involved to get to that point. So you're really not killing the ego. Christ says to take up your cross and follow him. That's killing the ego, is realizing that you're not good enough and you'll never be good enough.
Yeah. Man. Kill the ego to grow the ego. I mean, it's that goes across a lot of different things, not just Gnosticism, but everything, even like the military. They break you down to build you up, right? It's that whole, especially, and I find that it happens with things where they need to program you, not not just like, hey, I'm the way, follow me, and that's it, right? You don't need no breaking down of ego at all, other than that's just part of the belief. And I mean, you do have to break down your ego, but it's done differently, of course. So
right, absolutely. And more on the ego, the Essenes, they're a great group that are very interesting, because they're very connected to the Qumran caves and the Dead Sea, because they had cities there, or a city there, and they dealt with a lot of the scrolls that we found in the Qumran caves as well. And reportedly, Jesus was a member of the Essene segment of Jewish society, and they are the ones that essentially started protecting the royal Davidic bloodline of Jesus. And they were this mystic Jewish community. They were around during the Second Temple period that flourished in the 2nd century BC. And they also think that they seceded from the Zadokite priests. So you got this Rex Deus that's interwoven in all of these different groups, even all these Gnostic groups.
Mm-hmm.
And what's interesting is that, according to the story of the Essenes, is that Jesus was removed from the cross when he was still alive, so he never died.
Okay.
And then they proclaim that Jesus then married Mary Magdalene, and they had 2 children. So they had to split her and Jesus up because they had to protect the children. So Mary heads off to France, and she ends up at the Rennes-le-Château. And we're going to talk about that place. That's a very interesting place when it comes to the Priory of Sion documents that were supposedly discovered. Also, there's a demonic statue of Asmodeus there, and we'll talk about why Asmodeus is also at this chapel. And she heads to this Rennes-le-Château, the home of the Cathars, Merovingians, Essenes, Alains, Rex Deus, Templars. They're all there in this one epicenter. And the other son was said to have migrated to England with Joseph of Arimathea.
Yeah.
And that's where the Priory of Sion begin talking about Mary Magdalene being the chalice, the Holy Grail, the rose. That's where the Rosy Cross comes from in Rosicrucianism. The rose represents Mary Magdalene. She is the chalice. And that's where even in the movie, the Da Vinci Code, when they talk about Da Vinci's painting of the Last Supper and how the one that's drawn isn't actually one of the disciples, it's actually Mary Magdalene,
right.
which I agree with. I think that Da Vinci did that on purpose, and
Absolutely,
I think that was his
have.
goal. Absolutely. I don't think that he did this without thinking ahead of what they were trying to hide. And we talked about just now this Rennes-le-Château and how we started finding out about these weird documents, these Priory of Sion documents that were supposedly found there. In the 1890s, there was this father, Saunier, and he supposedly discovered these Cathar documents, and they tracked Mary Magdalene to Jesus and Jesus's bloodlines, and they had these genealogies, and they chronicled the survival all the way to the Merovingian bloodlines, right? So what's weird is he finds these documents and then becomes stupid wealthy. And he ends up building this Tower of Magdalene there at Rennes-le-Château. And he's this, poor father, but all of a sudden finds these documents, has all this unbelievable wealth, and he's getting it from the church, which is also interesting. So, of course, the Gnostics will say the church is paying him off to not put out the information because they knew that if people found out that Jesus wasn't really the Son of God and he had children, that it would shake Christianity at its core. Really, that's the game that they've always said. That's why that the church did that. I think it's a double move. I think that that's really the thing that they want you to see, but ultimately what they're really protecting is these other bloodlines that is going to end up being something very significant in the end times. And it will be something that's presented as a Messiah type figure, but it's not going to be what they're saying that it is, that it's Jesus's bloodlines.
Gotcha.
So what's interesting is this Tower of Magdalene. He builds this Tower of Magdalene to honor Mary Magdalene after he finds these documents, right? So the other part that was really interesting, though, in the chapel, this statue of Asmodeus, and man, this statue of Asmodeus is wild. So if you know anything about demonology and Asmodeus, Asmodeus was the guardian of secrets. So Asmodeus, very interesting that they put this prominent demonic figure statue in the chapel that you can see to this day. And
so bizarre.
It is bizarre, but it makes sense if Asmodeus is the guardian of secrets and they are protecting this secret bloodline, the royal cup, the chalice, which would be Mary Magdalene and subsequently her bloodlines that spawn out of it.
That's wild. Guardian of Secrets, Asmodeus. I can't believe it's in the chapel.
Yeah, it's really interesting. You could, again, just type in Asmodeus in Google search engine or something, and you'll pull it right up.
I'll probably put like a picture of it, like overlaying once we get through this. Like, yeah. Wow. That's wild. Yeah, that was always something that hit me about the that story that Dale. I mean, it's a book. It's a great story. But like how the Merovingian kings, how that whole bloodline just again, that's probably an episode on itself with the Merovingians. and how
I did a whole episode of the Merovingian, the Fisher Kings, they called them.
Yeah, the Fisher Kings, right?
And
That's
they've
some
got
rabbit holes, man.
Absolutely. I mean, what's really interesting, one of the queens was said to have mated with a quinatar, which also slid into the bloodlines, which I think that's a little more plausible if we're talking about where these bloodlines are really coming from, if we're talking about hybrids and we're talking about Nephilim bloodlines. But that was said to have happened as a part of these Merovingian Fisher King bloodlines. And that's part of their lore.
Wild. Have you ever been to any of these places over?
I haven't.
I've been to the chapel in the Sinclair Chapel.
Mm-hmm.
The symbolism all over that place is absolutely, it just will blow your mind.
I bet.
You can't believe that they actually have it there. You're just like, wait, seriously? Yeah. And then to have it and call it a chapel, right?
Right.
Now, I know that, just like a lot of things, but it was built as a chapel. But a lot of times, you've got places where other religions will come in and they'll like overtake. You literally think this place would be like a pagan building, and
Right.
that the church just came in and took it over. But that's not the story. So it's wild. All these things are wild. Love it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a lot of what I found when I was doing this research about the supposed bloodlines of Jesus. It gets even deeper. So you were just talking about the Sinclairs, and we can kind of shift into the Priory of Sion and how that really comes to be. And the Sinclair clan, they were the Scottish guardians for the preservation of the Templar / Rex Deus / Priory of Sion Gnostic bloodline of Jesus, which is pretty wild. And this Scottish Templar alliance actually started in 1128. And this is when the Templar founder, Hugh Payan, came along, and he met with King David I of Scotland. And this was after the Council of Troyes, where St. Bernard de Clairvaux, they integrated this whole Celtic Christian church within the Gnostic Cistercian order. So they actually were able to hide themselves within Catholicism by doing that. And then King David ended up ascending to the throne. And that's when the Celtic Christian church was struggling financially. And then the elders decided that they could connect with these Templars, specifically St. Bernard, and he was super wealthy. And then they just merged with that Cistercian order, which ended up being the Cistercian abbeys. So it ended up being a branch of like monks and nuns that broke off from the Benedictines. And again, they were all connected to Bernard of Clairvaux and this Latin rule, which was the Templars. So basically, everything was connected. It's like Lego pieces. It all connects to this bloodline, supposed bloodline of Jesus that they're all protecting in this clan Sinclair. And they were the barons of Roslin, and we can get the Roslin Chapel, correct? So that's when we start getting into the deeper aspects of the Les Dossiers secrets. And that's where we start finding out more about these grand masters, these leaders that are supposedly running the Priory Brotherhood. And that was a really interesting piece of information that's talked about a lot in most of the Holy Blood, Holy Grail series, the book, and then you've got obviously the Da Vinci Code. Anything that talks about these bloodlines of Jesus, you're going to see the Priory of Sion. Now, if you go to places like Wikipedia or any of these other spots, obviously they're going to try to discredit Plantier, who brought forth these documents that he said he found in Roslin Chapel. But what's funny is, even in that movie, they talk about how, and this is a fact, and you can find this in the mainstream sources, that he was pressured to come out and say that he forged these documents. So he actually didn't come forth for a long time, and they actually pressured him to do so, which I think that Pierre Plantard, I feel like that I think it was just a shell game. I think he was in on the shell game. I think it was, hey, listen, we want you to go forth and say you were pressured to do this. So it's the ultimate psyop. They were in on it. So I'm going to go forth, act like I'm pressured to say that's a forgery, when in essence it really is a forgery, but it actually is a bloodline that we're protecting. So it's a multi-layered psyop that they were running.
These are not the droids you're looking for. Getting them out of the way. Like, that didn't happen that long ago. I mean, that only happened in like the 50s, right?
1964, actually.
Oh, so the 60s, 50s, 60s, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And they just played it off like it was a scam.
Right. And I think that was the scam. Act like it's a scam.
Is a scam.
Right. Act like it's a scam to make people feel like that he got pressured to do it, so it makes people put more eyes on it to think that it is real.
But that's the thing. Like, I've heard people that seen, things about people that actually analyzed the documents, and they couldn't tell that they were forgeries either.
Correct.
Some of them they could, but some of them they couldn't. It was that if they're forgeries, they're the best they've ever seen.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So when this list of Grand Masters came forward in 1960s, Pierre Plantard came out, and what was interesting enough about it was he said that he was the last Grand Master. So that's where a lot of people say that it's a forgery, because he was just trying to create this kind of new secret society and put himself at the top of it.
Right.
And I get that way of looking at it. And I'm not saying it couldn't be true, because, I'm open-minded to,
of course, any
of this stuff being a complete scam. So we don't know for sure, but what's interesting about it is the names that are talked about, their tie-ins to occult practices throughout history, and also Plantard's knowledge of the genealogies and the bloodlines was super interesting too. So I found what he said to be compelling enough to say, yeah, I think there probably is a Priory of Sion, but I also think that they, again, played this shell game to say it's fake to make you believe that it's real, when in essence, the bloodlines are fake, but they are protecting a bloodline. It's just not Jesus's, if that makes sense.
Gotcha.
So a lot of names on that list too that are pretty wild. Nicholas Flamel's on there. Leonardo da Vinci obviously would be on there. Robert Flood, another big occultist. Robert Boyle, another one. Isaac Newton is a very interesting one that's on there too. Charles Radcliffe was on there. We got John Cocteau, and he was the last one before Plantard. So he was what they said was the last Grand Master before him. So it's pretty wild, and it is said to have started and founded in France. They don't know exactly when. Obviously, we got to track it all the way back to the original, which would be Guisors, Jean de Guisors, and that was in the late 1100s. So we're talking a long time ago when this actually started. But again, the Priory of Sion was just an offshoot from Rex Deus and Sinclair's and all these other groups that had been protecting it. It was just the new incarnation of what was protecting these bloodlines. And obviously it dissolved in 1956. And then, of course, Plantard came out in the 60s and said that, it was fake. It wasn't real. And then, of course, interestingly enough, all these books started coming out about it. And these guys believed it. Even after they said that it was a hoax, they're kind of like you and me. Yeah, he was pressured to come out and say it was a hoax. And we've seen plenty of people do that. We know plenty of UFO cases in the 1940s where people were talking about it. And then all of a sudden they came out and said, no, it didn't really happen. And then you come to find out later, they said, I just said that because I needed everybody to get off my back. And
government
people do
wild stuff when they get pressured, man.
Right.
I mean, you see people cop to crimes they didn't even commit willingly just to make it stop. So I can only imagine the pressure put on some of these folks to play along. Like of course they're going to, and they're going to tell you whatever will get you to leave them alone, period.
Absolutely, man. And the other thing about Plantard that was interesting, that he came out and said that he was actually of the male line of the Merovingians, and he was a direct descendant of Dagobert II, and he was the next great monarch prophesied by Nostradamus. So he went really deep with it, saying that he was the man, and he was the last Grand Master of the Priory of Sion, which, listen, he probably played up a lot of that. I'm sure he did. And again, he could have just been a front man to push this idea out and play it and spin it in a certain way to make it look even more like a hoax. And I think, to your point, that people that looked at the documents, some of them could have looked like forgeries, but there were a lot of historians that study text that said, man, this doesn't look like it's a forgery.
Well, one of the things that's crazy too is because those documents now are in the French National Library, but I think they're almost impossible to look at. I think that they won't let people look at them, from what I've heard. So
yeah, that's super interesting. And generally speaking, if they don't let anybody look at them, not even people who have
even
the credentials
academics, right?
Correct.
You know?
Correct.
So, like, you've got to get all kinds of different, like, it's, one of those layered, tiered clearance things. It's just wild. It's just wild, dude. So
for sure, man. So kind of to swing it into what I think that these bloodlines are, and I don't think it's any secret. I've kind of hinted towards what I think that they probably are. When you're looking at Rex Deus and the Priory of Sion organizations and what they're protecting, all these Gnostic groups, the Essenes, the Cathars, the Manichaeans, all these different groups, what are they actually protecting? Well, I think, and I know other people who look at these groups as being real, that they are protecting a bloodline for sure, and that would be the bloodlines of the Antichrist. And I think that the bloodlines of the Antichrist aren't coming from a bloodline of Yeshua. I think they're coming from some sort of fall over of Nephilim bloodlines of the past. And I think that's where we're going to get the inversion in the end days of what Jesus was, because the Antichrist is a figure who's going to mirror what Yeshua did. And he's going to pronounce himself to be a Messiah and essentially trick the Jews, at least for the first
bit,
for a bit, you know what I mean, before he runs up and defiles the temple. So I think that we can look at that and say, well, that makes a lot of sense, especially since they put this so heavily out in the zeitgeist over the past 30 to 40 years. I mean, they've been pumping this out there, and we're seeing new incarnations of it now. You know what even spawned me to even want to do this series was the fact that I kept seeing people, after I had done an episode about RH negative, and it was part of my Good Nephilim series, and I had done a whole piece about RH negative and where it could come from. Obviously, we don't know a lot about it. Well, there were a lot of people saying that I have RH negative and it's the bloodline of Jesus. I have the Jesus bloodline in me. And that's the one that's been rolling around really hard here lately. And it's back to that thing that I preach on my show all the time. It's this need for people to feel special. Oh, I've got the special blood. Oh, I'm a star seed. Oh, I'm an indigo child. I'm this, I'm that. Instead of just knowing that in God, we're all special. And yeah, there are things that each of us have that others don't, but it doesn't make us any better than anyone else. And I think that's what's happening now. People think they have this mystic power, and maybe they do to a point, right?
Layers of it.
Right, for sure. And that just spawned me out in this whole, I'm going to do this bloodlines of Jesus thing thoroughly and really go into where that they come from, who is actually connected to them, why they would want to even create this idea that Jesus had a bloodline when we know that he didn't, and what would be the motivation for them to do that. Well, if you create this hidden secret that is being protected, and then you release it at the right time and say that this is the guy that came from the bloodline of Jesus. This is the actual Messiah. This is who we've been waiting for all along. And then you get the Jews to buy into it too. Well, then you got the whole recipe for the end times right there. And I think that in the end, there'll be groups that come forward, whether it's Rex Deus or some of these other secret groups, and they'll produce documentation that historians will get a hold of, they'll be able to look at, and they'll quote unquote verify that this is of the bloodline of Jesus, and it will flip the world upside down if that happens.
Yeah,
And
for sure.
obviously, we know that in Daniel 11:21, it talks about he will be succeeded by a contemptible person who has not been given the honor of royalty. So we know that he's going to not be of the bloodline of Jesus, not the Davidic bloodline in that sense. However, I do think that there's a precedent to say that he's going to come out of one of the tribes of Israel and come from this Davidic bloodline, obviously not of Jesus, but of the Davidic bloodline. So I think there's something to be said for that too, especially when we're tracking all the bloodlines like Skoda and all these ones that end up over in Scotland and Ireland. And you go down that whole rabbit hole of the Tuatha De Danann. And that's when you start seeing, okay, the Tuatha De Danann are all tied up in this. And from most accounts, those were giants that had quote unquote magical powers. So that lends in this idea of the Nephilim too. So you've got this other connection that's interwoven into this idea of the bloodlines of Yeshua. And I believe in the end, that's what we're going to see, some version of that, right? I don't know how they're going to present it. I don't know exactly who's going to present it, but it makes a lot of sense if we have all of these groups throughout history that have tried to protect this bloodline, protect the chalice, right? What are they protecting it for? And if it's something they're protecting, it's got to be something that's significant. And if we know it's not the bloodlines of Jesus, what is it, right?
Yeah. I've always been of the mind, I guess, that when we talk about the Antichrist, I think we're talking about more than one possible person, right? I think, like you're saying, you've got this tree, and you've got all these little branches that come off of it that are all from the same root, right? From the same bloodline. But there's different houses within that, right? Just like any royal family.
Right.
And you've got little, like in any given generation, there's probably 3 to 4 different people that could step up to be, and they're groomed to be this guy, right? That's my theory. That's kind of my running theory. I don't know how accurate that is. It just feels right to me.
I don't think you're off, and I think they're always trying to push this to the forefront, and I think they've been thwarted because it's not time yet, right?
Yeah,
I think you're right. I think you have.
I just think they're being over ready, right? Or they're like trying to be the Boy Scout as a Boy Scout. They're trying to be prepared, right, and have all kinds of things that they can just do when the time is right. So
no, I think you're spot on with that assessment and what they've tried to do over the last 2,000 years for sure. And I do think eventually when it all culminates and the beast rears his ugly head, then I don't believe in the slightest that when he does, that he's going to be something that people fear. I think people are going to love him. I think he's going to represent peace and hope and all the things that we want out of what will eventually be a world leader, right?
Yeah.
And I think that right, exactly. And he's going to represent the Messiah, and that's how the Jews are going to get tricked. And that's how they're going to,
at least for a few years.
For a few years, for sure, until, about halfway through the tribulation, and then you see this whole thing unfold. But yeah, I do believe that these bloodlines, or the Jesus bloodlines, exist in a format that they are protecting. Now, I don't believe that it's actually his. And again, there's so many rabbit holes that spawn off from this. I mean, it's a massive series that I did on it. So people can go check that out if you want to hear the, like Tony Merkel says, the encyclopedia version of what I do. So
that's great. Yeah. But you've done episodes on all this stuff. So folks, check it out, man. I mean, one of the first things that ever drew me to your, was when you filled in for Tony, I think this was like 2 years ago, maybe. You filled in for him when he was on vacation, and you kind of started talking about the good Nephilim, right?
Right.
And that just sent me down this rabbit hole of talking and just doing mad type of research on David's Mighty Men. Just, just amazing. I love it.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite series. I'm working on a 5th part to that now. So I've got a 5th part I'm going to put out at some point with that. I just wrapped up my little season conspiracy theory series, and it ended up being over 12 hours.
Oh, man.
So it's 6 parts. I haven't even dropped the last 2 parts yet. They're on the way. And I went deep, man. I went as deep as I possibly could. I did just an inordinate amount of time and hours of research on this.
Yeah.
And I've just felt very compelled to do it, because I feel like that it really lends to what I've said, where conspiracy spiral out of control and people don't have a foundation to really look at these conspiracy theories through a logical and biblical lens. And then once it spirals out of control, people just start buying into whatever because it sounds good, sexy. I'll call them the sexy conspiracies.
Yeah, right.
It's sexy, and it is. Like, the little season is a very sexy conspiracy.
Absolutely. And it just makes you think, period.
Right.
I love stuff like that. Right. Like the rapture. That sent me down so many different rabbit holes on trying to pre-trib, mid-trib, no trib.
Right. And maybe believes there's 3. So, you know,
exactly.
He might not be wrong either. So he's got a good precedent for it. I've talked to him about it. So it's interesting. And I think for me, what really spawned me to want to do that series was, one, is it didn't feel right in my soul. And I said, I really need to look into this and just see at the root core biblically what's being said. Plus, I want to look at all these tertiary ideas coming out of it and see who's involved. You know, what is going on with new chronology and losing 700 to 1,000 years time? Who are the guys pushing this? You know, that's something that people don't ask is, and you know my show very well, I love studying people. And you find out a lot when you study people and what they're involved in. And to me, when I was able to research, hey, here's Anatoly Fomenko, and here's Gunnar Heinsohn, and some of these guys who are saying that we're missing all this time. Well, what do they believe about Jesus? That was my biggest deterrent from the little season was, man, these guys are wholly not Christian, and they don't believe Jesus is who he says he is at all. And how, as a Christian, am I supposed to take on board what these guys have to say about timeline missing?
Absolutely. Yep. So you have to put it through the lens of why are they doing this, and what do they have to gain from what they're saying? I mean, you just absolutely. Yeah. It's wild. So we're at like the 53-minute mark. So obviously this is called Broadcasting Seeds. I would like you, and I ask every guest, to plant a seed in the audience's mind before we go.
I would say your best course of action with anything in life is to seek God's will for you at the root core. You know, I'll leave you with a nice verse that I've been telling people a lot here recently, and it's Ecclesiastes 7:13. and it says, "Consider what the Lord has done. Man cannot straighten what he has made crooked." And it's funny because you don't think about it that way, because you think that, straight is the way, narrow is the way. And that's true. But what this verse means is that our road isn't straight because we're not supposed to see to the end. And God has massive hills, mountains. He's got massive turns. We don't know if there's a wolf around the turn. We don't know what's going
Literally.
on. A lot of obstacles, right? And I think that's built by design to teach us, one, how to trust him and have faith in him. And then number two, it's to have that reliance that we know that the plan that he set out for us is best for us, and we're willing to just take a step forward. I'm not worried so much anymore about 5 years down the road. I've got plans. Obviously, you're supposed to plan and you're supposed to create and you're supposed to look ahead. But I also know that those plans can change depending on what God has. So I'm getting more comfortable with the here and now and not worrying so much about the end game, because for one, I don't really know the end game. So
Yeah. The deeper we get into this, the less I think I know, right?
right.
As it should be, because we don't know shit. We really don't. So what have you got coming up, stuff that's coming up for you?
So I've got a very interesting documentary series that's coming out Q1 next year, and you and I have talked about it. It's called Crowley's Melonheads, Children of the Beast.
It's awesome.
I spent about a month shooting it. So 17 days of shooting, but we were traveling all over. We went to Utah, Connecticut, Upper Ohio, Michigan, all the places the Melonheads are seen. We also went out to Utah, to Salt Lake, to get into some interesting Mormon lore that tied into this whole occult Melonhead project that I was working on. Got a lot of really interesting names involved with it too. Obviously, Tony Merkel's a part of it, and Isaac Weishaupt, who a lot of people know who he is too. So he's a big part of this too. So it's going to be a really interesting series. Started out as a film project, but it got so massive that it's going to be a series, a mini series that we're going to put out. So
Awesome.
It's going to be really interesting. And it's going to be our first really foray into mixing heavily researched material with boots on the ground. So I spearheaded the project with a ton of research I've done on Crowley and his involvement with British intelligence, and also this weird connection with him and these big-headed entities. So it's going to be a pretty fascinating thing. As far as the podcast goes, I've got a ton of projects I'm working on with that, and some interesting people I'm going to be working on too. I just recorded for the confessionals with Ed Mabry on a very interesting topic. So that's come out at some point early next year. So that'll be a lot of fun for people. And yeah, I've got some new music I'm working on as well. So I got a lot going on.
Well, just grinding, baby.
Grinding.
Tell everyone where they can find you again.
Yeah, the easiest place to find me is Joel Thomas Media. I do this backwards every time. It's go to Linktree /Joel Thomas Media. You can get to everything from there. So all the things that I do, you can get right there. Any of the socials you like, I'm on. So you can go to there to find me. And obviously the podcast Free the Rabbits is on every platform. You go to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, you can go to YouTube, where I do video, and I have a lot of pictures and media that go up while I'm talking about a lot of these things too. So, and I source as much as I possibly can with the research, so I can tell you where to go find it, where to go read it. I'll suggest books to people to go check out too. So it's a good time. So go check it out if you get a chance.
Absolutely. Thanks for coming on, man.
Absolutely, man. I had a blast.
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate it.
Pull the veil back. Light in the tunnels. Truth don't die. It just waits. Free the rabbits. They kept the truth in the shadows, locked down like a habit. Roots run deep through the blood, can't bury the magic. We crack the code, break the chains, watch the lies all panic, wake the world. world from the trance, free the rabbits. They kept the truth in the shadows, locked down like a habit. Pride plays in the dark, every throne they mapped it. We crack the code, break the chains, watch the lies all panic. Lift the veil from the world, free the rabbits. Every legend got a leak, every priest got confession. Digging up the family trees, truth tied to oppression. Magdalene's line still breathing through the lessons, while the crowned heads bow to their secret obsession. History ain't written, it's redacted in the margins. The code, the holy blood, the mysteries alarming. The shepherd and the serpent both hunt for the garden, but the lamb didn't die, so these wolves could keep barging. We questioning reality, and that's why they fear us. Turn conspiracy to fact, and the sleepers start to hear us. They built walls of deception, but we tearing down the mirrors, cause the biggest revolution starts ringing from the spirit. We kept the truth in the shadows, locked down like a habit. Roots run deep through the blood, can't bury the magic. We crack the code, break the chains, watch the lies all panic. Wake the world from the trance, free the rabbits. From the catacombs to Rome, every secret got a cost. Ain't no map to the truth, every path double cross. Sign hid in the code, keep the keys in the vaults. But every lie they stacked high just exposes they false. We ain't playing with religion, we at war for the soul. Demons flood the information just to fracture control. Prophecy ain't poetic, it's a classified scroll, encrypted in your DNA since the days we were whole. Every rabbit's a rebel when the hunters get sloppy. Every question's a bullet when the truth gets choppy. They want silence, but the spirit won't copy. This ain't a hobby, we the glitch in they proxy. The truth in the shadows, locked down like a habit. Roots run deep through the blood, can't bury the magic. We crack the code, break the chains, watch the lies all panic. Wake the world from the trance, free the rabbits, free the rabbits, free the rabbits. When the lies on the labels, who crowns a king? When the throne's built on fables, bloodlines clash. In the war, the cradle, we flipping the tables, we flipping the tables. Antichrist rumors played out a prophetic. We just dig up the truth, let the skeptics get frenetic. Mary's legacy's a weapon and they know it's magnetic. The future ain't set, but the scheme's still genetic. I'm turning prophets, they can't censor the stream, cause every word's a torch for the ones still unseen. Rabbits run through the tunnels with the secrets they glean, till the underground rises and we crash the machine. Misinformation is a prison, but we picking the locks. Every mind that wakes up adds a crack to the box. You can bury the truth, but the bones still talk, and the ghosts of the past still haunt every false god. Freedom, 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 rabbits. Wake 'em up, priory and panic. Truth is a habit. Freedom, 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 rabbits. Wake 'em up, priory and panic. Truth is a habit. The mind is the battlefield, and we just arm the audience. Free the rabbits. The mind is the battlefield, and we just arm the audience. Free the rabbits.